Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over how to build a sign in with Apple button, and not only that, we'll actually be able to see what happens and see the data that we get when the user signs in. If you're ready to learn how to use sign in with Apple, stay tuned. Let's learn together. Alright, so here we are in our brand new Xcode project, and the first thing that we need to do to get started with sign in with Apple is we need to go into our main project settings here. And then we need to click on Signing and Capabilities. And inside of our Signing and Capabilities section, there is a Add Capability, so let's click that. And then we will search for our Sign in with Apple. And we will go ahead and just check and click on that box. And then whenever we do that, as you can see, we will get our new Sign in with Apple capability here. And with that little bit of setup, we're ready to go ahead and go back into our view and start building out the Sign in with Apple button. So the first thing that I want to go ahead and do is I want to go ahead and add a couple of variables here. And so for right now, we're going to store these in app storage, but app storage is actually not a great place to put these long term because some of these values will be used to identify a user, and that's not something you want to store in app storage because app storage is actually just a plain text version that would give anybody with access to the phone access to those credentials. So it's not great to store the any kind of personally identifiable information, also referred to as PII, in app storage. So let's go ahead, and for now, since this is just a demo, we will put an app storage key here, and we will say our user ID. Now this is one that actually is okay to store inside of app storage because it's a unique identifier and there's no personally identifiable information that is user specific, so it's just a randomly generated ID that we'll get later. And then we'll create a app storage value for not the user email but just email, and this is one that we don't want to store on the device. And then we'll also do an app storage value for our first name, and this is var first name, like that. And then we'll do app storage for last name, just like that. Great. Alright, and so with that, we are ready to start building out the view. Now that we've got those out of the way, let's kind of go over the reason why we've stored these here first. So whenever you use sign in with Apple, you only get the email and the name one time. And that one time is the very first time that the user signs in. Every time after that, you won't receive the email or the first and last name anymore, because Apple expects that you will have stored this to your database. Every time after the first sign in, you want to only use the user ID. So that's why we want to go ahead and store these and prepare to store these now so that we are ready whenever we first sign in with the app. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get rid of our boilerplate view here. Alright, so in our view, let's go ahead and let's use our sign in with Apple button. And that's not showing up because in order to get that to display, we actually need to import our authentication services, just like that. Nice. And so now if we search for our sign in with Apple, we see a sign in with Apple button, and let's choose the one with a label, an on request, and a completion. So our label, we will choose that we want users to be able to sign in, and our on request, we'll hit enter on this one, and we'll say that this is our request, and this will be our auth result, just like that. And so for our request, we actually want to be able to get a specific scope. So we will choose our requested scopes, and we don't just want email, we would like email and the full name of the user. Now, you can only ask for this once, and that is only on the first sign in. So go ahead and if you need these, make sure you do this now because you won't be able to get access to them later. And that's all we actually need to do to set up our request. Now our on completion is a little more complicated, so we will switch on our auth result, and yes, we'll go ahead and let Apple figure out what we need here. So let's add our missing cases. Great, so we've got our success case and our failure case. So on success, let's say that we have our result, and on failure, let's get the error out of our failure. And this one is easy, so let's go ahead and let's just say print failed to sign in with our error, and let's give it the localized description of that error, just like that. And then if we were successful signing in, then we actually want to switch on the result dot credential, just like this. And now the only thing that Apple actually knows about is the break statement here. So we want to do a Caselet, which is very similar to an if let, by checking to see, like, does this thing actually exist before I do this case? So we'll say our Caselet is going to be our credentials. So if we can get our credentials as an AS authorization Apple ID credential, we want to go in here and we want to get these credentials out and actually store them in the variables that we created up top here. And we also don't want to overwrite any of these values since we only ever get them one time. So we'll check and see if they are empty or if they are nil first. So if email is nil, then we want to overwrite email with our credentials.email. And just so that we can go ahead and make this happy here, we'll break out of this by default if we don't have an actual credential whenever we get returned. Nice, so that's fixed our error there. And then, so we've got our email value. So let's go ahead and let's do the same thing with our first name. So if first name is nil, then we want to say our first name equals our credentials dot full name, and then the given name, because this full name is actually, as we can see with an option click, it is a person name components. So what that means is you can get different pieces of the user's name back out whenever you ask for the name. So we will get their given name, which is essentially their first name. And then we will ask for their last name. So if the last name is nil, then we want to try to store the last name. And then finally, our user ID. Now, again, the user ID is one that you get every time. So we can just say if our user ID is nil, then we want to store the user ID, and that is our credentials.user. Now, as you can see, the user is an identifier for the authenticated user, so this is our unique ID for the user, we don't want the user identifier, which is what AI is trying to give us there. Nice. All right, and with that, we should be able to see something in our view. So let's go ahead and see what we got. And it looks like it's having a little trouble here, so let's jump out and jump back in. And there we go. Cool. Now, one downside to this button is it looks to be built mostly with UIKit, and so because of that, we don't get all the niceties that we get with a normal SwiftUI button. So let's go ahead and let's put a frame on this button, and let's give it a height of just say 50, for example. There we go. Nice. And now our button actually looks like a button. And now another downside to using the built-in button is it doesn't actually work with dark and light mode very well. And so because of that, we will need to access an environment variable here. And our environment variable that we need to access is the color scheme. And so we'll say this is var color scheme, just like that. And so our styling that we want to work with this thing here. So let's say that this is our sign in button style. So we want it to be different. So if the color scheme is dark, then we want a white button, and if it is not dark, then we want a black button. Now, as you can see, there is a little bit of going on with the simulator, at least in iOS 26. So I've got to report that bug, but just know that this is how it should be working. All right, and so with that, we're almost ready to click our button. So this button, as it sits right here, will work, and it will work exactly as we expect. But I want to be able to see a different screen if this sign-in actually does work. So let's go ahead and let's collapse our button here. And so we will say if our user ID, we will say if let our user ID equals to our user ID, which just means if we have a user ID and it's not nil, then we want to display a VStack. And inside our VStack, we will display a text of hello, and we'll try to get the user's first name here. And if that doesn't work, then we will just say hello world. And then we will also try to get the user's last name and display it here. So we'll say last name, otherwise an empty string, just like that. And just to be able to see it, we will display the user's user ID. And so we'll display that here, user ID, just like that. And then let's also give a sign out button. So we can do a button, and we can say sign out. And the action of this button will be to just unset that user ID. So we'll say user ID equals nil, just like that. And that'll allow us to sign back in and back out. And we don't want the local variable user ID. We want the global user ID. There we go, just like that. Nice. All right. And so if the user signed in, we want to display the signed in view here that we've got. But if the user is not logged in, we want to display the sign in with Apple button, just like that. Very cool. All right. And with that, let's give this a run and see what we get. All right. Now, as you can see here, we've got our sign in with Apple button. So let's go ahead and click that. Now, as you can see, it is displaying the name here, and then we can use hide an email. So we'll check the hide the email box. And let's go ahead and change the name. So instead of giving it my full name, just so that we know that this is in fact working, let's just take the E off of Chase there. And then we'll click done. Nice. All right. And then we will say continue. So we're signing in with Apple. All right. Now I did go ahead and cut out that last little bit where I had to enter my password, but I entered the password and clicked sign in. And now as you can see, we've got hello and then Chase with the E missing. So we know that that came from the sign in flow. And we've got our user ID here. Now this user ID that you see here, this is a unique identifier that you will use to know that your user has signed in with Apple and that they are valid. Very cool. So now let's go ahead and let's click sign out, and we should be taken back to our sign in with Apple button. Nice. And with that, we've been able to use the sign in with Apple flow. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and if you leave a comment, just be nice about it. That's all I ask. Thanks. Have a great day.